Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Congress and distinguished guests, thank you for joining us this afternoon. First thing, please turn off your cell phones. My name is Ziad Asali, and I'm the president of the American Task Force on Palestine, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicating to advocating the creation of a state of Palestine living alongside Israel in peace. We are proud today to have as our guest one of the leading advocates of the two-state solution, a man of credibility, competence, and courage. Salam Fayyad has been Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority since June of 2007. An economist, previously an engineer actually, turned into an economist, with a PhD from the University of Texas. Dr. Fayyad worked first as an academic, and then he joined the World Bank and IMF. He served first as finance minister in the Palestinian Authority in 2003 and was credited with introducing sweeping reform, instant transparency, and cracking down on corruption. In 2006, he was elected to the Palestinian Legislative Council as a member of the Third Way Party. And in June of 2007, he was appointed Prime Minister. Since then, Dr. Fayyad has focused on rebuilding Palestinian institutions, and in the face of great many adversities, he has managed to realize significant achievements. Due to an appointment with Secretary Rice, Dr. Fayyad will have to conclude this time with us shortly after 3 o'clock, and I myself will have to leave a bit earlier to meet with the Secretary. He has, however, graciously agreed to answer questions following his remarks. On your seat, you will find a card for you to write your questions, and 15 minutes prior to through his address, someone will pass up and collect your notes. So please be ready. Please join me in welcoming Prime Minister Salam Fayyad.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ziad, for the kind and warm introduction. Thank you, and the American Task Force for Palestine for organizing this event, for giving me the opportunity to speak before this distinguished audience. I see a lot of friends and familiar faces in the audience. Greeting to each and every one of you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. Let me begin by saying that by now, the basic parameters for resolving the conflict that has afflicted Palestinians and Israelis are well known to include the establishment of an independent Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with the State of Israel. However, it's no longer enough to speak of wanting a state of our own. The nature and character of that state are just as important. As Prime Minister, I have turned my attention to these elements of statehood. It is important to lay the foundations for the kind of state we want and to pursue our vision of a Palestinian state despite the occupation. Reflecting the substance and spirit of President Mahmoud Abbas's program, my government has set out a platform that outlines the vision for our future state and how we intend to achieve it. Our view is that the establishment of a Palestinian state requires progress, parallel progress on multiple tracks: governance, security, and economics, in addition, of course, to the political track. This requires a serious and sustained commitment on the part of all parties, not just Palestinians and Israelis, but the United States, the Quartet, the Arab countries, and the broader international community. The role of the United States is particularly instrumental. With the convening of the Annapolis Conference, with U.S. commitment to oversee implementation of the roadmap, and with efforts, as President Bush said, to end the occupation that began in 1967. For our part, we're working towards this goal with utmost seriousness. It is with the same seriousness that I'm proud to say that my governance platform is amongst the most progressive in the region. The state we seek is one that must be open and democratic, based on the rule of law, respect for human rights, cultural sensitivity, and religious tolerance. We intend to build strong institutions that can meet the needs of our people today and exceed the expectations of tomorrow. In short, we shall build a state that all Palestinians can be proud of, and my government would lead by example. We led and continue to lead by putting our public finances back in order. Between 2002 and 2005, significant reforms to our public finance system were carried out, including the introduction of a single address for all revenues and expenditures of Palestinian Authority, so-called single treasury account. While these reforms came undone in 2006, we have managed within few months since my government took office to fully repair the damage, to upgrade the public finance system, and in my humble opinion, to comply with the highest international standards of integrity, transparency, and accountability. Indeed, in 1 month's time, anyone will be able to log on to the website of the Ministry of Finance to view detailed monthly reports showing exactly where our revenues are coming from and how they are spent. Through efforts like these, trust is gradually being reestablished. Congress has already appropriated $218 million of the $555 million pledged by the United States last December, and we expect that a substantial portion of that sum will be deposited in our single treasury account. This is a major vote of confidence, one that we are proud of, and one that is likely to encourage other donors to follow suit. We have also taken measures, despite the political risks entailed, to reform civil service. We reduced public sector employment by about 40,000 positions through the cancellation of illegal contracts and contracts of those who failed to meet terms of employment. At the same time, we expanded the scope and coverage of our social safety net to include tens of thousands of new beneficiaries. We also adopted a national plan to reduce electricity subsidies. Make no mistake about it. As many of you know, civil service reform and the reduction of subsidies are politically sensitive measures. But it would have been a mistake not to take these difficult measures. Good governance demands nothing less. The difficult decisions of today are the foundation for tomorrow's progress. Progress and good governance, a stronger economy, and yes, a unified society. We have regularly paid salaries to all Palestinian Authority employees for 8 consecutive months after 16 months of irregular or untimely payments and partial payments. We have also repaid a portion of the arrears owed to civil servants and to private sector suppliers. In addition, we have paid the outstanding financial obligations to local government institutions. And we have supported communities negatively impacted by the construction of the wall. We have also begun work on over 250 small community development projects. We have adopted modern legislations, including in the fields of procurement, income tax, and pensions. And we have passed important legislation to combat money laundering. In a similar vein of ensuring transparency, accountability, and adherence to the rule of law, we have carried out major reforms concerning charities. Good governance means that society's most needy must not be politically exploited. We have also taken concrete steps to end the exploitation of and incitement in places of worship. These are just some of the signs of progress that are helping to restore faith in the Palestinian National Authority. Another area that demands concrete steps is that of security, of course. I firmly believe that security is at least as much a Palestinian need as it is an Israeli need. Palestinians, like all peoples, want a predictable and secure place to live. We want to be able to work and send our kids to school without worrying about crime or violence. That is why I'm pleased to be able to say with confidence that we are making tangible progress on the security front. We are doing this not as a favor to Israel, and not because the Americans or the Europeans have asked us to do it. Rather, we are taking charge of security because it's in the Palestinian national interest to do so, and because this is what our people want. We must not allow destructive actions of the few to compound the hardship, suffering, and insecurity Palestinians already face as a result of the occupation. Upon assuming office, and in the face of extreme adversity, my government immediately began enforcing a ban on armed militias in the West Bank. We also immediately began to address the issue of Palestinian fugitives by securing Israel's commitment not to target or arrest them. We have also undertaken a concerted campaign to enforce law and order by deploying forces in major urban areas. We tackled one of the most challenging cities first, and that was Nablus. Despite a great deal of advice to the contrary, we felt it was important to deploy in the difficult areas first as a show of our determination, the determination of Palestinian National Authority to clean up our streets. We have since expanded the scope of the deployment to include other cities. And wherever we have deployed police, people have felt a qualitative improvement in their security situation. In conjunction, we have commenced the reconstruction of our security headquarters as a means of demonstrating to our people that the Palestinian National Authority is reconstituting itself and that it is reasserting its authority. This is in no small part thanks to the assistance of the United States, as well as of our European and Arab partners. With the help and advice of U.S. Security Coordinator, Lieutenant General Keith Dayton, we have begun professionalizing, reforming, and equipping our security services. Of course, much remains to be done. The question in my mind, however, is not whether we can succeed, for we are making progress day after day. The question, however, is whether we will be allowed to succeed. Limitations imposed by Israel on where and how our forces can or cannot act limit our ability to bring security to our people and to fulfill our security commitments under the roadmap. The Cinderella story of Nablus effectively ends after midnight, and sometimes even in broad daylight, when Israeli forces conduct raids and arrests. Forget about the glass slipper for a moment. Palestinian security forces are not permitted to wear body armor donated to us by the British because the armor could stop Israeli bullets. Furthermore, recurrent Israeli military incursions severely erode our credibility with our people and undermine our efforts to enforce law and order. I firmly believe that we have demonstrated our ability to do the job if given the chance. Where we are afforded the opportunity, we are tenacious in using it. And where we are not, we are determined to do everything we can to create it so that we can bring security and deliver law and order to the people and land of Palestine. What must not be forgotten, ladies and gentlemen, is that the focus on security alone will not by itself bring about security. Delivering on security will be far easier if we can deliver in tandem significant socio-economic improvements to the lives of ordinary citizens in Palestine. This is an important priority, as currently about 50% of households in West Bank and 80% in Gaza live in poverty. In addition, 34% of Palestinians face food insecurity, defined as households with income and consumption of $0.60 or less per day. Our situation would even be more dire were it not for the generosity of the international community. Over $7 billion in assistance was pledged to the PNA over the next 3 years. While we very much appreciate this assistance, our goal is to achieve self-sustainability. Indeed, the Palestinian Reform and Development Plan is underpinned by a multi-year budget framework, the aim of which is to attain fiscal sustainability and a progressively greater degree of self-reliance through the implementation of very strong adjustment measures on the expenditure side. Notwithstanding the socio-political risks involved, we have embarked on this adjustment path out of a deep sense of self-responsibility and out of our strong belief that no amount of external assistance will sustain the economy, especially if the money merely goes to meet salaries and other recurrent expenditures. We are not looking for a budget to sustain an occupation. What we are asking for is an investment in peace, peace for Palestine. As part of the investment in peace, we are looking ahead towards economic recovery. We are pursuing parallel tracks of quick impact initiatives to jumpstart the economy and to lay the foundations of sustainable economic development. Quartet Representative Tony Blair and his team are working with us on the prioritization of some important projects for quick implementation. They are designed to create jobs and build export-oriented businesses. On a parallel track, we have proposed in the Palestinian Reform and Development Plan strategic public investments and the rehabilitation of infrastructure. The projects are aimed at bringing the agriculture and manufacturing sectors back to their full potential. Tourism and housing will also get our full support as they are labor-intensive and show great potential for job creation and expansion. Our vision for the Palestinian economy is of a diversified and thriving free market, led by a dynamic private sector in harmony with the global economy. For this reason, we are making great efforts to encourage Palestinian and international businesses to invest in the future of Palestine. In May of this year, indeed on May 8th and 9th of this year, for example, we will hold an international conference in Bethlehem to encourage private sector investment. We hope to follow it up with similar events in other cities around the world. Trade, competitiveness, and innovation are the driving forces of this vision. But this very vision becomes vulnerable to any disruption in trade, in supply chains, and in access to markets. Disruptions caused by over 500 checkpoints and roadblocks in the West Bank, a wall which cuts off communities from their farmland, Israeli settlements that limit when and where Palestinian goods and people can move, and a siege imposed on Gaza. The Quartet, the donor community, and international financial institutions all agree on what is needed for economic recovery and sustainable economic growth. And that is the removal of restrictions on the movement of people and goods. Regrettably, in the 8 months since my government took office, little to no action has been taken by Israel on this front. In fact, the number of checkpoints and roadblocks erected by Israel in the West Bank increased from 528 to 561 in 2007. The devastating impact of the Israeli closure regime is especially clear in Gaza, where only limited humanitarian supplies have been allowed to enter since last June. Even the entry of those supplies was sharply curtailed over the past few weeks. The Gaza economy cannot grow without trade, and its population cannot survive today on the provision of limited humanitarian assistance. Just as sanctions have rarely yielded intended consequences in other parts of the world, it is my firm view that the blockade against Gaza will never yield anything but more misery for our people there. For this reason, and in the face of great risk, the Palestinian National Authority has indicated its willingness to manage the crossings in and out of Gaza if Israel agrees to lift its blockade. The blockade must be lifted, and I'm encouraged by the international community's support of our call for lifting it. For Gaza is, and always will be, an integral part of our homeland and of our future state. Let me be absolutely clear that we are totally against the firing of rockets against Israeli towns from Gaza. And just as I reject the firing of rockets and all forms of violence from Gaza, so too do I reject the disproportionality of Israeli military action and the collective punishment it has imposed on our people in Gaza. All the topics I have discussed, ladies and gentlemen, so far, including good governance, security, a healthy economy, while necessary for statehood, are insufficient for a viable state. In fact, we will never be able to fully enjoy good governance, security, or a healthy economy without one key missing ingredient, and that's freedom. Freedom to live our lives, freedom to govern ourselves as an independent people, freedom to build a society without the interference of outside forces, and yes, freedom for our prisoners languishing in Israeli jails. None of the efforts that we have made to improve the governance, security, or economy of Palestinians will be sustainable if we are not free of the occupation we have painfully endured for 40 years. This means a sovereign and independent state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. You must expect nothing less from the people of the Holy Land, nor will I. This requires us to sit with Israelis in good faith to conclude the terms of an agreement that will resolve these and other aspects of the conflict between us. Until that time, what is most desperately needed is the cessation of all settlement activity in order to preserve the very possibility of a negotiated two-state solution and to revive public confidence in the peace process. Annapolis was a major step forward, but I cannot say we're not having difficulties. In the 2 months following Annapolis, Israeli incursions and bombings on Palestinians and their property claimed the lives of 165 people, injured another 521, and caused untold damage to property. Meanwhile, Israel intensified settlement activity, particularly in and around East Jerusalem. As we attempt to negotiate, Israel published tenders for hundreds of housing units in East Jerusalem settlements and continued construction of thousands of housing units. This handicaps Palestinian negotiators, not to mention, of course, the wall and the closure regime, which continue to suffocate the Palestinian economy. In this connection, we welcome the recent appointment of General William Fraser and hope that he will head a robust trilateral mechanism as agreed amongst the parties to oversee the implementation of the roadmap so that we can focus on the business of negotiation and state building. Of course, it is incumbent upon me to remind everyone that in addition to the external challenges, we face internal challenges to the implementation of our vision. It was Abraham Lincoln who in 1858 said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. However, I do believe that the political fragmentation we currently face is at least partly the result of the failure to deliver freedom and peace to our people. If the Palestinian people are offered a vision of peace based on freedom, justice, and dignity for us and for our Israeli neighbors, I'm confident that my people will unite behind this vision. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the ultimate goals of the Palestinian people today are the same as they were back in 1988, when the PLO, the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people everywhere, under the leadership of our late President Yasser Arafat, endorsed the two-state solution as a means to realize our national and individual aspirations. A sovereign, free, and viable state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, and a just and agreed-upon solution to the issue of refugees on the basis of UN General Assembly Resolution 194. The values to which the Palestinian people aspire today are the same values we have sought for ourselves in our endeavor to end the occupation: dignity, respect, justice, and above all, freedom. Our government is unwavering in its commitment to these values. I think our achievements over the past 8 months speak to this. We will continue to be tenacious in our pursuit of good governance, law and order, security, and economic recovery. And as we do so, we will be making progress toward conquering the sense of defeatism and confronting the destructive rejectionism that have afflicted us for much too long. That, my friends, is a worthy cause, for I do believe that to win our struggle for freedom, defeatism must be defeated and rejectionism has to be faced down. In this latter battle, in this larger battle, we need your help. We need the international community to partner with us in making the difficult decisions of today for a prosperous and peaceful tomorrow. We ask you to partner with us now. We ask you to invest in peace, peace for Palestine. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for accepting to take questions,
Sure. No problem.
Mr. Prime Minister. I think I will take full advantage of the podium here and ask you the first question.
Can I have water, please?
Good. Here's your water. One of the problems that we face here is trying to explain to people who say that the PA, under the leadership of President Abbas and yourself, is too weak to govern. And then how is it possible to make a deal with a weak government that cannot deliver? The other criticism, of course, is that the other side is completely not qualified to be a partner in the negotiations. How do you explain that? How would you propose we explain that?
Well, being weak or otherwise is not independent of the context in which we operate. I think it's clear from the remarks I made to you, ladies and gentlemen, today that I'm someone who really very strongly derives the motivation and vision for what has to happen from deep sense of self-responsibility. It is what we have to do ourselves, what we Palestinians have to do ourselves in order to help ourselves. Nevertheless, of course, the context in which we operate cannot be ignored. What is often forgotten, as we are judged and continue to be judged by the standards by which independent countries are judged, countries that have been independent for decades, what is often forgotten and overlooked is the fact that we are under occupation and that we have to deal with all of the restrictions that actually are associated and practices that are associated with that. Nevertheless, I think we have demonstrated ability to deliver good governance, to deliver in the important sphere of security under extremely difficult and most challenging conditions. I outlined some of the difficulties and challenges that we have to face as we move on to try to deliver good governance, including security to our people. And when I talk about security, of course, I'm mindful of the important regional implications of security as well. Where we have intervened, we have made a difference. There's no question about that. Security is state of mind, and all you have to do is ask the people of Palestine in areas where we were able to deploy our forces, the kind of difference and the extent of difference we were able to make. This is there for anyone to see and judge for themselves. Question of partnership, I think much too much was made of it for many years. 7 or 8 years of virtually complete marginalization under the pretext of there is a partner, there is no partner, etc. I reiterate here the message that President Abbas and I, on all occasions, state we're ready to negotiate. As a matter of fact, that's why we took part in Annapolis conference. Annapolis was an important station along the road. We are in the process of trying to engage in serious negotiations to deal with the political issues, the core issues of this conflict. So there's no question of our willingness and readiness to engage. The question is whether the context is right enough to ensure that that political process does what it's supposed to do, produce the outcome that we are looking for, end the occupation that began 6/7, lead to the emergence of an independent state of Palestine, a state that's viable, contiguous. So when I look at all of these issues and evaluate these assertions of adequacy of partnership, strength and weakness, I cannot really do so without looking at these other elements of the broader picture. We are there trying to negotiate in good faith, and I believe that it's important that this effort and process be given the chance necessary. For that to succeed, it is important for us to be able to improve the context in which we are operating. It is important, as I had mentioned to you, that ordinary citizens begin to feel the difference. And that is a hard thing to do. It's extremely hard to govern under the restrictions that I talked about today. So I think important, instead of engaging endlessly in characterizations of such as weakness, strength, adequacy of partnership, etc., I think greater effort should go toward focusing on what has to be done to improve the context in which we are all operating.
There are several questions about Hamas, and I want to combine them perhaps in this formulation that says, can Hamas be a partner for the democratic, tolerant state that you seek, or is its illiberalism a hindrance? And how would you solve the problem of Hamas in Gaza?
I think an important part of being in government and important part of leadership is to make it absolutely clear to people as to where you stand on basic fundamental issues. A lot of focus has gone in the past, traditionally, to the political side of the equation, the core issues of the conflict between us and Israel, the broader issues of Middle East question. And not as much attention was given to the attributes of statehood, as I talked about in my statement today. The kind of state we aspire to have, the kind of society we would like to see our children grow up. That vision is very important to us. I think it's important to speak forcefully, openly, and with conviction to these issues. outlining a point of view that is in sharp contrast to the point of view in many important respects put forward by Hamas. I mean, there's nothing wrong with political differences or differences of view. Those, I think, can be sorted out if only we can find agreement on the most fundamental of issues that need to be agreed, and that's a security doctrine that works to the benefit of the Palestinian people, and one that is consistent also with the need for us to live up to our commitments in this important area. That's key. But those issues, I believe, have to be debated. We have to speak our mind as to where we stand on those issues. I believe we have. But beyond engaging in a debate on they say, we say, for this kind of debate, I do not believe, split-screen television debate, this kind of debate, I do not believe is likely to be won in an environment, in a region that is engulfed with a strong sentiment of rejectionism. What I think is required is, yes, for us to say where we stand on issues like this, issues of openness, cultural openness, tolerance. These are all important values of our statehood. Values that are actually enshrined in our Declaration of Independence of 1988. And this is the kind of state we aspire to have. I believe that as we continue to promote these values, we should really focus, as we are doing, on trying to deliver. For as I had mentioned to you, this debate is not going to be won on the basis of they say, we say. This debate is going to be won on the strength of they say, we do, they deliver, we deliver better. And to do that, we need to do all we can to help ourselves, but we need also the assistance of the international community to make this happen. We need, additionally, and most importantly, for Israel to improve the context in which we operate.
Mr. Prime Minister.
In terms of Gaza, you mentioned Gaza, yes. First of all, let me say that the situation in Gaza is, of course, as we all recognize, quite exceptional. It is catastrophic from many points of view. We've talked about the humanitarian dimension of this, and everybody is mindful of the humanitarian disaster Gaza has become, and the extent to which life has become completely unbearable in Gaza. All of this is important, but I think it is also important to note that what happened in Gaza in midsummer of last year represents a catastrophe to the Palestinian people, the most significant blow to our drive to attain freedom and independence for our people since the occupation of 1967. It's a major setback. It's one that really has to be dealt with. It's not going to last, it's exceptional, but in order to deal with this, we have to be patient, we have to do everything we can. We, the Palestinian Authority, are very much responsible for the welfare of our people in Gaza. The violent takeover of power by Hamas in Gaza in mid-June of last year does not alter the fundamental reality that the Palestinian Authority is a legitimate authority and that it is in charge of trying to provide for the welfare of our people there to the extent we can. And consistent with that, we have been calling for reopening of crossings to Gaza so that movement can take place of people and goods from into Gaza and out of Gaza. And we offer to actually assume responsibility for managing those passages. I believe that's important. That will enhance our capacity to deliver and to take care of the needs of our people there. I think that's important. That's an important element in changing the dynamic. There are 1.5 million Palestinians who are living in Gaza today. 1.5 million people who have nothing to do with anything, quite frankly. And to continue on this path of what amounts to nothing but collective punishment of 1.5 million Palestinians is, to say the least, counterproductive, if not outright destructive. You all witnessed the influx of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians streaming into Sinai a week ago or so. And that is the result of the situation that I have just described to you. You cannot leave 1.5 million Palestinians in Gaza without much to lose. I think that's really a huge mistake. I think people have to be put in a position, better position, of having something to lose. But the situation right there, right now, is not conducive to moving forward, either in the sphere of provision of services, which I believe we could provide, or in the political process. We need to be patient. We need to stay with this. I insist that this is an exceptional circumstance, one that we have to survive in the hope that we'll get to a better tomorrow. But for that to happen, issues have to be understood. Principles have to guide our work, principles that are derived from our own experience. Most importantly, what is really required before anything else is national consensus on the importance of adopting a security doctrine that completely outlaws the holding of arms and weapons outside the purview of the Palestinian National Authority, building towards statehood on the one hand, and continuing to tolerate the existence of armed militias on the other are two mutually exclusive concepts. These are two parallel lines. They will never meet. They have not met in the case of other nations before. Our experience suggests that this is not the right path to stay on. We should get on with this and accept this as a principle that should guide our need to exist together. The rest of it, I think, can be settled. Political differences can be taken care of. It is very important for us to understand the context that has produced the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority was created in the context of agreements based on international commitments that we made in 1993. We should remain firmly committed to those agreements. I'm here specifically referring to the agreement of the Declaration of Mutual Recognition. This is very important. This is an important part of what we have agreed to. We should continue to live up to those commitments, and I think ways can be found in which political differences can be sorted out. But what is essential is for there to be agreement on the security doctrine. For lack of such agreement, I think, cannot but continue to threaten our very ability to stay the course we are on right now, trying to indeed end the occupation and get freedom for our people.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I will excuse myself after I ask this question, and it has to do with the year 2008. Several questions about this issue. The message of President Bush a few months ago was that there will be an agreement perhaps in 2008. And then you, I believe, said yesterday that it is unlikely to have an agreement by 2008. And then we have Vice Premier of Israel, Ramon, today stated that the two sides would reach a declaration of principle and not a final agreement. Do you have any crystal ball about 2008? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll see you. Thanks. Well, in terms of likelihood of a settlement in 2008, yes, I have spoken to this, and not only recently, by the way. Only my recent remarks to Reuters on this were carried. But to those who may have found them difficult to understand, let me say the following. I think those who found them difficult to understand forgot that Annapolis was not just about relaunching the political process. Annapolis was for sure about that. Annapolis was supposed to relaunch the political process, and I believe it did that. But Annapolis was also about something very important. Annapolis was also about requirement that action be taken in a manner consistent, taken by both sides, Palestinians and Israelis, in a manner consistent with the need to improve the context in which those negotiations are to proceed. And that is where, the idea of roadmap obligations and the need to live up to the commitments made or entered into by the sides in the spring of 2003. That's where the idea came from. What we were looking for in the run-up to what then became known Annapolis Conference, shortly after President Bush made his July 16 speech, was a series of measures that could be undertaken with a view to improving the context in which the process could proceed. A, to ensure that the process would have the credibility necessary, particularly after, as I mentioned, 7 or 8 years of virtual complete marginalization and no progress whatsoever on those political process. And B, to ensure that once the process was relaunched, it was going to actually lead to the outcome it was supposed to lead to. In the main, ending the occupation and establishment of an emergence of an independent state of Palestine. I think looking at one of these two sets of considerations while ignoring the others is not the right way to go. I think preoccupation with the issues of here and now, the roadmap commitments, by itself is not adequate. But just as that is not adequate, it is not adequate to only focus on the political horizons issues. Those two strategies have to be pursued simultaneously in what I really term as a bifocal strategy. Strategy based on pushing the negotiations forward without ignoring the need for there to be immediate improvement on the ground in the context in which we are operating. Improvement in ways that give our people and the Israeli people confidence that the process is actually going to be productive. Improvement that actually will lead people to buy into this process. And people have good reason to be skepticism. And when you look at those obligations under the roadmap, you find that from the point of view of the stated objective of this political process, ending the occupation and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, you will find that those commitments make a great deal of sense. We did not write the roadmap, nor did the Israelis. But the commitments included in the roadmap make a great deal of sense given the stated objective of the process. On our side, they require improvements in governance, including security. Security is an aspect of governance. They include building institutions, strengthening capacity in all spheres of governance, including security. If we are talking about the establishment of an independent state of Palestine as a result of this political process, it stands to reason that issues of governance of this kind be taken seriously. Those are our commitments on the roadmap side. On the Israeli side, they include, importantly, the commitment to freeze all settlement activity. Again, it makes a great deal of sense, particularly when viewed against the backdrop of what this process is supposed to lead to: creation of an independent, viable Palestinian state. It stands to reason, therefore, that if in fact commitments are to be expected of the sides of the conflict, they should be expected in a manner, or should be crafted in a manner consistent with the need to attain the objectives set forth. What I see as not happening to the extent it should, or it can, is progress on these issues, progress on the implementation of commitments under the roadmap. I do not see sufficiently firm commitment on the part of Israel to the implementation of the commitment with respect to settlement cessation of settlement activity, settlement freeze. We do not see that. We encounter difficulties, as I have mentioned in my statement. On our side, we're doing the best we can. We have made progress, and we will continue to do so, notwithstanding the challenges that we face and continue to face. Our capacity there is without limitation, is not without limitation. What we undertake to do is to continue to do the very best we can and not be daunted by the challenge or the challenges, however great they may be. We're doing this because this is the only way we know how. This is the one thing that we really have to stay with. We just cannot give up, notwithstanding the frustrations and difficulties that we face. And those difficulties are indeed daunting. But we continue to try, and we continue to try to be able to fully deliver on all of our commitments. And they are commitments that are first and foremost in the interest of our own people. We're talking about providing and building strong institutions, strong and competent institutions, the nucleus of our state to deliver government services effectively, fairly, and decently to our people. And we're also talking about bolstering and building up our security capacity to provide law and order to our citizens, and also take good account of our regional security implications. That's what this is about. We're trying to do the very best we can, and we have made progress. We can make more progress, and we're committed to continue to try. These are the issues that have to preoccupy the attention of those who are trying to push this process forward. It's not enough to talk about negotiations, important though as negotiations are, because this conflict is not going to end before it ends politically in the way that I have described in my statement. These issues have to be negotiated, agreement has to be reached, but there has to be parallel progress on both of these tracks simultaneously. The issues of here and now cannot be ignored unless there is tangible progress in the period immediately ahead with respect to those outstanding commitments. Then I think honesty would require that we begin to really call this for what it is. We just cannot, continue to proceed as if things are going or proceeding in line with expectations, because so far they have not, to tell you the truth. Annapolis took place in November. We are now in February 2008. We need to begin to see progress, most certainly, in the hope that we are going to be able to reach agreement in 2008. And I hope that will be possible. I hope that will be possible. We should do everything we possibly can to get to that point. Working on the issues of here and now is important for that reason and many other reasons. We should continue to push. We should continue to make progress in the hope that we'll be able to reach agreement. If we do that, it'll be great. That's what we seek. That's what we seek. That's what we're trying to do. That is what I really meant to draw attention to. The need to focus attention, once again, on what has to happen in order to underpin the political process, in order to strengthen and enhance its chances to deliver that which has to be delivered.
A question that echoes what President Bush said recently in his visit to the region about checkpoints. And the question is, how can Israel and the PA relax restrictions on the Palestinian majority without helping extremist groups at the same time? When it comes to freedom of movement and checkpoints.
Can you say that again?
How can Israel and the PA relax restrictions on freedom of movement on the Palestinian majority?
We're not imposing restrictions. Palestinians are not imposing a restriction. That's why I misunderstood the question. Yeah, anyway.
So how can you work together with Israel to relax restriction of movement for the majority while preventing terrorism?
Security is, of course, a legitimate concern. It is, and we are sensitive to the security needs of the State of Israel. And as I said, it is as much a Palestinian need as it is an Israeli one. The problem is we Palestinians and Israelis, and especially we Palestinians, find ourselves caught up in this chicken and egg kind of argument. In order to ensure security, Israel represents, we have to have checkpoints and we have to restrict mobility. Yet at the same time, unless there is a possibility of movement, some movement to begin with, ultimately leading to relaxation of all of these restrictions, no security effort is going to be adequate to provide security to everyone, Israelis and Palestinians alike. I guess the answer to this is for us, as I say, and I always like to start with what we have to do, to continue to do the very, very best we can in order to improve conditions on our side. And we have made very good effort, and we have made good progress, as everyone can see. I do not believe, Israel, or the process for that matter, can afford, waiting until there is an absolutely perfect alignment of stars over the Middle East before checkpoints and restrictions begin to be eased. I do not know when there was ever a perfect alignment of stars over the Middle East, ladies and gentlemen. So we need to begin to see some progress. If restrictions cannot be, the 561 of them, checkpoints and roadblocks in West Bank, if they cannot be removed overnight, and I know they cannot and will not be removed overnight, why can't that process begin? My government has been in office for the last 8 months. Amidst all kinds of talk about doing something to make it possible for us to succeed and to do things. I regret to tell you that what happened on this front was close to nothing. And restrictions are pretty much the same. And they are as intensive, and mobility is as restricted as it always was, with one difference, of course. Gaza now is under complete closure. How can there be, economic life? How can there be sense that, there's a possibility of moving forward if there is no action whatsoever on the other side? So I think, this cycle, or this chicken and egg, argument has to be, conquered and broken down. We have to do what we have to do out of responsibility toward our own people, and consistent, very much consistent with our vision of, the kind of state we want to have. But at the same time, as we do so, we should begin to see movement on the part of Israel. But, there's no alternative to this. I mean, the last thing we would want to see is violence, continuing to get in the way of our effort to attain independence and freedom for our people. And that is the sense in which I mean what I say when I say that security is as much a Palestinian need, at least as much a Palestinian need as it is an Israeli one. But there has to be a broadening of this concept, willingness to really, as a matter of fact, begin somewhere. Take some steps. So at least people can begin to see some difference. That's the only way I know how. And I really would not look at it in terms of who benefits and who does not benefit and all of that sort of thing. I think engaging in this kind of targeting of outcomes is not something that is realistic or necessarily productive. This is not a chemistry lab where you somehow are able to calibrate and predict in terms of behavior and sentiment how people are going to respond to what. I know one way of doing things, and that's doing them the right way. I mean, do what you have to do. Go out and provide good, honest, clean government. Try to do the very best you can to improve the lot of your people. Seek and obtain, hopefully, with the help of the United States, the rest of the international community, improvement in the context in which you operate. And, let that run and see how that goes, instead of, stopping to evaluate whether if we were to remove restriction A, category A or B is going to benefit more or less. I mean, I think this is really most unproductive, and it's not the way that I look at things. The way I look at things is that there has to be movement forward, while at the same time acknowledging that we have to stay the course and continue to do the best we can to improve security conditions.
Okay, one last question, and we'll allow you to make a pitch on this one. What is the single most important form of economic assistance you need right now? And where is the international community falling short?
Cash.
That's short.
How about that for a short answer? But no, let me say a little bit more about that, if I may. But that's the thing that came to mind. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a good outing in Paris on 17th of December of last year. Donor community was extremely generous with us. It fully endorsed our submission for a reform and development plan covering the years 2008-2010, pledging more assistance than what was expected to be adequate to fully fund the plan, more than $7 billion of assistance. In fact, the latest count, our French friends, the chair of that meeting, tell us that the number is 7.7 billion now, when they clarified some pledges. These are pledges that are expected to cover all kinds of needs. Budgetary support, meaning the kind of assistance required to help us run the Palestinian Authority operationally speaking, paying salaries, current expenditures and the like. Some for project implementation, meaning investment in physical infrastructure. Some in support of institution building and capacity strengthening, technical assistance. Some humanitarian assistance. The figures also include assistance provided through UNRWA, the UN agency in charge of providing relief to the Palestinian refugee population. So we obviously welcome the global amount pledged. What really we need at this time more than anything else is assistance that is allocated to help us with the first need, and that is budget support. We do have a substantial shortfall in terms of adequacy of our revenues to cover our operational expenditure needs. Unfortunately, while this happens to be the thing that we need the most, it tends to be the kind of assistance that donors like to give the least. Donors like to provide assistance in support of infrastructure, development spending, and all. We do too. And that is why, we did not go to Paris and say, give us cash because we need to run the PA anyway. Give us money and we will spend it. No, we did not go to Paris with that. What we went to Paris with is a commitment, actually, to embark on a path leading to self-sustainability, to a viable fiscal situation. In fact, we went to Paris with more than that. We did not go to Paris just with a plan or with a statement of intentions on there. We went to Paris having begun already to implement measures aimed at improving the prospects for fiscal viability and enhanced self-reliance when it comes to covering our own current expenditure needs, salaries and the like. We have taken very strong measures. We had taken, actually, prior to the donor conference, very strong and tough measures on the wage bill. We are now in the process of implementing another far-reaching and deep measure that will cut substantially subsidies in the area of electricity. The problem there related to basically poor collection because of poverty, and also the emergence over time of a culture of non-payment, the kind of problem that is extremely difficult to tackle once it takes roots. Nevertheless, we started to tackle it in an environment that, to say the least, is extremely challenging, very difficult. We're challenged politically, we're challenged on the security front, we're challenged by the adversity that we face every day, but at the same time, out of deep conviction that we're not going to be able to build for a better tomorrow unless we begin the fixing today. We started doing these things. And that is why the world was willing to actually partner with us in expressing its willingness to provide us with the support necessary. What we would like to see in the months ahead is for allocating as most of those funds as possible, particularly the funds allocated for 2008, more in the direction of budgetary assistance, meaning cash assistance. As I mentioned in my statement, we're extremely grateful to the Congress of the United States for having appropriated $218 billion already of the 555 pledged by the United States and Secretary Rice at the Paris conference. 150 million of this is going to be, is expected to be shortly transferred to us. That will help us enormously. It is important, for us to try to get more of the money available in 2008 directed more toward budgetary support. It'll be of great importance to us at this juncture to have as much of that front-loaded as possible, meaning most of it to be available in the earlier part of the year rather than the latter. Because as we move forward, I'm confident that we, in the light of work that we're doing with Arab donors, that will be able to actually bridge the gap in the latter part of the year. So it's very important for us to be able to get the most assistance we get, particularly for budgetary support now. The last point I make on this, money has been pledged already. And we, the Palestinians, are telling you, we are, as a matter of fact, doing the best we can to help ourselves in terms of building institutions, in terms of reforms in all areas of government. And we are delivering much better governance today than we were even a few months ago. And we are on a path that, indeed, I'm confident is going to deliver us, is going to really actually deliver us the kind of state that we are all looking for. We, at this time, our assessment of need is that this is the kind of assistance that we need the most. If money has been pledged already, and money cannot, because of the restrictions on the ground, be utilized quickly to finance projects, because the implementation of projects will itself require the removal of restrictions on mobility. How are you going to implement big infrastructure projects with restrictions on mobility being what they are today? Money has been pledged. It's in the pipeline. It's allocated. It's appropriated. Why can't it be shifted more in the direction of the kind of support that we need the very most at this very critical juncture? That's part of our message, and I hope that we will be successful, and I hope the world community will see our need this way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry. If I may make a pitch, the text of the speech of Dr. Fayyad will be available at 4 o'clock at the ATFP website. That's atfp.net.